The Galactic Council had declared it impossible 300 cycles ago. The wild cubs of Thesara Prime, ferocious, untamable creatures born from volcanic ash and lightning storms, had never been domesticated. 47 species had tried. 47 species had failed, many losing limbs or lives in the attempt. The Croventi had used neural suppressors. The cubs had died rather than submit. The Zalarian hive had attempted genetic modification. The cubs had turned feral, attacking everything in sight. The mighty Vorath warriors, conquerors of 17 star systems, had employed force and discipline. They had been the first to officially recommend the cubs be classified as fundamentally incompatible with civilization. So when Arara Chen stepped off the transport shuttle onto Thesara Prime, the council observers watched with barely concealed contempt. Another human, they thought. Another soft, fragile creature from that backwards world who thought their emotions could solve what logic and power could not. Arara didn't look like much. She stood barely 5.5 feet tall, her dark hair pulled into a practical braid, wearing nothing more than standard exploration gear, no weapons, no restraints, no neural equipment, just a small pack on her back and an impossibly calm expression on her face. "You understand the risk?" Ambassador Thexler asked, his crystalline voice tinkling with barely suppressed amusement. "The last individual who attempted this lost 3 appendages before we could extract them." "I understand," Arara replied simply. "Where are they kept?" The council had prepared a containment facility, reinforced walls, energy barriers, the works. Inside, separated into individual cells, were 12 cubs. Each one was roughly the size of an earthwolf, covered in scales that shimmered between obsidian and crimson, with eyes that glowed like molten gold. They snarled and thrashed against their enclosures, a cacophony of rage that made even the battle-hardened guards uncomfortable. "We'll begin with the most aggressive," Thexlar announced, gesturing toward the largest cub. Its designation was VRN-7, though the guards simply called it the Killer. It had hospitalized 4 handlers in 2 days. "No," Arara said quietly. "I'll start with that one." She pointed to the smallest cub in the corner, a scrawny thing that pressed itself against the back wall, trembling. Thexler's translator struggled with the human expression on his face. "That one is worthless. Too fearful. It will never—" "That one," Arara repeated, with a firmness that surprised the ambassador into silence. They called it VRN-4. When Arara entered, its cell alone, over the vehement protests of every observer, the cub immediately flattened itself against the wall, a high-pitched keening sound emerging from its throat. Arara sat down. Not near the cub, not reaching toward it. She simply sat, cross-legged on the cold floor, and began to talk. "Hey there," she said softly. "I know you're scared. I know this place is loud and strange and nothing feels safe anymore." The cub's golden eyes fixed on her, pupils dilating. "I'm not going to hurt you," Arara continued, her voice steady and warm. "I'm not going to grab you or force you to do anything. I'm just going to sit here and talk, and when you're ready, if you're ever ready, you can come closer. Okay?" The council observers watched through the transparent walls. Thexlar checked his chronometer. "The human will grow bored in an hour," he predicted, "or the cub will attack when she shows weakness." 1 hour passed. Arara kept talking, about Earth, about rain, about the garden her grandmother used to keep. Her voice never wavered, never rose, never demanded. 2 hours. The cub's trembling lessened. 3 hours. It lifted its head slightly. By the 4th hour, the cub, she had started calling it Vren, a soft name that meant brave one in an old Earth language, had moved 2 feet closer. "You're doing so well, Vren," Arara whispered. "Such a brave cub. You don't have to trust me yet. Trust is earned, not taken. Day 2. Arara returned, sat in the same spot, spoke with the same gentleness. This time she brought food, raw meat from Thesara Prime's native fauna. She didn't offer it directly. She simply placed it between them and continued talking. Vren watched her for 30 minutes before darting forward, snatching the meat, and retreating. But this time the cub didn't press against the wall. It stayed in the middle of the cell, chewing, watching. "Good," Arara said, smiling. "See, I keep my promises. Food and safety, that's all I'm offering. No tricks." The council observers multiplied. Word spread. The human was attempting the impossible with nothing but words and patience. She's wasting time, a Croventhi scientist declared. One cub showing mild habituation means nothing. But by day 7, something unprecedented happened. When Arara entered the cell, Vren didn't retreat. The cub stood in the center of the space, head lowered, but not in submission, in greeting. "Hello, brave one," Arara said. She sat down and for the first time extended her hand. Not reaching, just offering. "Would you like to come closer?" Vren took a tentative step, then another. The observers held their collective breath. This was the moment when every other species had failed, when proximity triggered the cub's aggressive instincts. But Vren didn't attack. The cub approached slowly, nose twitching, until it was close enough to sniff Ilara's outstretched hand. The human remained perfectly still, continuing to speak in that impossibly gentle voice. "That's it. You're doing wonderfully. You're so brave, Vren, so smart." The cub's rough tongue darted out, tasting her skin. Then, in a moment that would be recorded in Galactic Council history, Vren pressed its scaled head against Ilara's palm. The human's eyes welled with tears. "Good cub," she whispered. Such a good, brave cub. Ambassador Thexlar's crystals dimmed, his species equivalent of stunned silence. Over the next 3 weeks, Arara repeated the process with each of the 12 cubs. Not with force, not with technology, with patience, with consistency, with kindness. She learned each cub's personality, fears, and preferences. She never demanded, she only offered. Vren became her shadow, following her around the facility, responding to verbal cues that Arara taught through positive reinforcement and gentle repetition. The other cubs followed suit, each at their own pace. The council convened an emergency session. The impossible had become reality. A human, with no special equipment, no genetic advantages, no military might, had accomplished what the greatest civilizations in the galaxy could not. How? Thexlar asked Arara directly, genuine curiosity replacing his earlier condescension. "What is your secret?" Arara looked at Vren, who sat beside her, calm and content. "It's not a secret," she said. "You all tried to break them, to dominate them, to remake them into what you wanted. I just listened, respected their fear, gave them a choice." She ran her hand along Vren's scaled back. "Humans learned a long time ago that the strongest bonds aren't forged through force. They're built through trust, through proving day after day that you're safe, that you're kind, that you'll never hurt them even when they're afraid." Thexlar processed this. "Your species was once violent, primitive." "We were," Arara agreed, "and some of us still are. But we learned, often the hard way, that kindness isn't weakness, patience isn't surrender, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is sit with someone's fear and say, 'I'll wait for you,' however long it takes." Vren made a low, rumbling sound, not a growl, but something closer to a purr. The cub nuzzled against Ilara's leg. The council watched in silence. Then slowly, Ambassador Thexlar inclined his crystalline head, a gesture of profound respect among his people. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "we have much to learn from humanity after all." Arara smiled and scratched behind Vren's ears. "Perhaps you do. And lucky for you, I'm a pretty patient teacher." The cub, once wild, once deemed untamable, closed its glowing eyes and leaned into her touch. In that moment, the galaxy learned a lesson that Earth had spent millennia discovering, that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from the ability to conquer, but from the courage to be gentle.